Nolan stirred her black coffee with a chipped spoon, the clink of metal against ceramic the only sound at her booth in the corner of Me's diner. It was almost midnight, the only hour she could afford to eat in peace after her shift cleaning offices downtown, after the buses stopped running on time, after the city fell quiet. Her dinner, a grilled cheese sandwich and fries she couldn't finish. She didn't notice the man in the next booth until he spoke. "Excuse me." His voice was low, smooth, but clear above the hum of the jukebox. "Is that the last piece of pie?" Kiera looked up, startled. The man sat alone, one booth over, half in shadow. He looked too put together for a place like Me's dark jacket, crisp shirt, wristwatch that probably cost more than her rent. His eyes were a pale gray blue, sharp and curious. He had the kind of face you didn't forget. She blinked. "What?" He nodded toward the glass case at the counter. "The cherry pie. There's only one slice left. I didn't want to steal it if you were eyeing it." She blinked again, then let out a soft laugh. "No, go ahead, I was just finishing up." He didn't move for the pie. Instead, he smiled genuinely. "Thanks." Kiera gave a polite nod and looked back down, trying not to feel self-conscious. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, her jeans were faded at the knees, and the back of her hands were still red from scrubbing tile floors all day. She didn't know he was watching her. And she didn't know that the man sitting a booth away, Rowan Callahan, was a billionaire. He was supposed to be in Europe by now. A delayed flight, a craving for something simple, and a stubborn refusal to sit in a luxury hotel suite alone had landed him at Me's diner instead. He hadn't expected her. He hadn't expected her soft laugh or the way her eyes lit up when she smiled or the quiet strength in her posture, like she was used to standing on her own. He didn't know her name yet, but he wanted to. "You come here often?" he asked suddenly. Kiera looked up again, surprised. "Only when I'm too tired to cook," he smiled again. "Must be a long day." She hesitated, unsure why she was still talking to him. "Yeah, I clean corporate offices downtown. By yourself?" "Yeah." "What's your name?" She studied him, wary but not scared. He didn't seem like a creep, just curious. "Kiera, I'm Rowan." She nodded slowly. "Nice to meet you, Rowan." He motioned toward the seat across from her. "Mind if I join you? I'll buy you dessert." She narrowed her eyes. "Is that your way of getting the last slice of pie?" He grinned, but it didn't feel smug. "Definitely, but I'll share." Kiera stared at him for a second, then shrugged. "Fine. But only if there's whipped cream." That's how they ended up sharing the last slice of cherry pie at midnight in a booth with cracked leather seats. Her laughter came easier the more they talked. He was funny and surprisingly down to earth. Not many men wore designer watches and still knew how to fold a napkin into a crane. Rowan didn't say much about himself, just that he was in town for a few days for meetings. He asked more questions than he answered. Kiera didn't mind. It felt nice to be listened to. By the time she checked the time, it was almost 1 in the morning. "I should go," she said, sliding out of the booth. "I've got another shift in 6 hours." Rowan stood too. "Can I give you a ride?" She shook her head quickly. "No, I'm fine. The bus runs late." He hesitated. "Then let me walk you to the stop." She opened her mouth to protest, but something in his tone stopped her. It wasn't pushy, it was genuine. "Okay," she said quietly. Outside, the night air was crisp. They walked in silence for a bit. When they reached the bus stop, she turned to him. "That was nice talking to you," he smiled. "Yeah, it was." She hesitated, then said, "You're not from around here, are you?" "No, I live in New York." She raised a brow. "You here for work?" Rowan paused. Something like that. Before she could ask more, the bus pulled up. She stepped back. "Well, thanks for the pie." "Anytime," he said, and something in his voice made her heart skip. As the bus pulled away, she looked back at him through the window. He was still standing there, watching her leave. The next night, Rowan came back to the diner, and so did she. They didn't plan it. They didn't need to. Their conversations got longer, their laughter louder. He never pushed, never invaded, just listened, asked questions, treated her like she mattered. Kiera started looking forward to those nights. The quiet ones. The ones where he made her feel seen. Rowan started rescheduling meetings just to make it in time for her midnight dinners. One night, she said, "You never tell me what you do." He looked at her for a long time, then simply, "Finance." She tilted her head. "Like stocks, among other things," she laughed. "You're mysterious," he smiled. "You're honest." That night, he paid their bill in cash and left a tip bigger than the meal. She didn't see how much until he walked her to the bus again. "Rowan," she said, her voice hushed, "you tipped me $200. He looked unbothered. She said her son needed a new set of braces. Kiera stared at him. "Who are you?" He met her eyes. "Someone who wants to see you again tomorrow." And she did. Again. And again. But what Kiera didn't know, what she wouldn't find out until later, was that Rowan Callahan wasn't just some finance guy. He was the founder of Callahan Holdings, and he was falling for her. Fast. The rain had started just after sunset, a slow drizzle at first, then heavier, soaking the sidewalks and blurring the streetlights into soft halos. Kiera tugged her hood tighter around her face as she pushed through the wind, her canvas shoes squishing with every step. The diner's neon sign flickered ahead, casting red and blue glows across puddles in the parking lot. Inside, the warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. She shook off the rain, dropping her bag beneath their usual booth. She hadn't planned to come tonight. She'd been exhausted, her feet aching from a double shift and her tips barely enough to cover groceries. But something kept pulling her back here, or rather, someone. Rowan was already sitting there, one hand around a mug of coffee, his jacket hung neatly on the hook beside the booth. His eyes lifted the moment she walked in. He stood, quietly taking her coat without asking, draping it over the seat beside him. "You look like you walked through a waterfall," he said, reaching for a napkin and offering it to her. "I basically did," she muttered, blotting her damp forehead. "The buses are running 20 minutes behind." "I almost turned around twice, but then I thought maybe the pie would be worth it," he grinned, motioning to the table. "They're out of cherry tonight." She groaned and collapsed into the booth. "Tragedy." "I took the liberty of ordering you a hot chocolate instead," her brows lifted. "You remembered I liked that," you said it once. "After the night manager gave you one on the house." Kiera tilted her head, surprised. "That was over a week ago. I have an excellent memory." The waitress arrived with 2 mugs of cocoa, steam curling into the air. A swirl of whipped cream crowned hers with shaved chocolate on top. "I can't believe you remembered the chocolate curls," she said, staring at the rim. Rowan shrugged. "Details matter." She took a sip, the sweetness warming her throat. "Okay, I'm impressed." He leaned back, watching her quietly for a beat. "You ever think about doing something different?" Kiera set the mug down. "Like what?" "Something that doesn't leave your hands raw." "I don't exactly have a list of options." "That's not what I asked." She narrowed her eyes. "You know, you're very good at dodging personal questions and redirecting them." Rowan's gaze didn't waver. "Sometimes it's easier to ask than to answer." Kiera studied him. "Are you hiding something?" "Not intentionally." Still sounds like a yes. He gave a soft chuckle, then changed the subject. "What would you do if you could wake up tomorrow and everything was different?" Kiera traced her finger along the rim of her mug. "I'd open a bookstore, one with a bakery inside. A place where people could come in, sit for hours, read, eat cinnamon rolls that ruin their diets." He leaned forward. "That's oddly specific." "I think about it a lot," he nodded. "And what's stopping you?" She stared at him. "Money, experience, a building, take your pick." He didn't press further. Instead, he said, "You have a name for it." She blinked at him. "What?" "The bookstore." "What would you call it?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Page and Pastry." Rowan's eyes lit up. "That's perfect." Kiera laughed. "Tell that to my bank account." A brief silence passed between them as the rain pounded harder against the windows. "I have a meeting tomorrow," Rowan said, breaking the quiet. "Early morning, I'll be gone most of the day." "Big deal?" she asked. He hesitated. "Very. You nervous?" "Not exactly." "You always this vague." Rowan turned his coffee cup slowly between his hands. "The truth is, I'm trying to keep this," he gestured between them. "Simple. I like being here, I like talking to you, I don't want to ruin that by dragging in everything else." Kiera tilted her head. "Everything else sounds suspiciously complicated." His jaw tightened for a moment, but he softened. "It is, but this right here, it's the simplest thing I've had in a long time." She didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't try. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a brownie wrapped in wax paper. "Me made this earlier and gave me one. I saved it." He accepted it with a grin. "You're sharing dessert with me now, only if you say please." He bit into it without answering. She laughed. Rude. By the time they stood to leave, the rain had slowed to a drizzle again. Outside, the streetlights reflected off the pavement like melted gold. Rowan walked with her to the stop, as he always did. But tonight, as the bus rounded the corner, she turned to him. "You don't owe me answers. But just so you know, I don't mind complicated, I mind dishonest." His expression shifted, not offended but thoughtful. Noted, the bus doors opened. She stepped up, paused, then looked back at him. "You're not just some finance guy, are you?" He didn't answer. The doors closed. And as the bus pulled away, she couldn't help but wonder what kind of man remembered chocolate curls and bookstore names, but couldn't bring himself to tell the truth. The first thing Kiera noticed when she stepped into the diner 2 nights later was that he wasn't there. Not in their booth. Not near the counter. Not even standing outside like he sometimes did when he arrived early. Her chest tightened before she could stop it, and she busied herself with unzipping her jacket, pretending she hadn't expected to see him again, not after the way she'd looked him in the eye and questioned the version of himself he kept offering her. She ordered tea this time. No pie, no cocoa. She didn't need reminders. By the time she finished her drink and the rain returned in heavy sheets, she'd talked herself into letting it go. Whatever Rowan Callahan was hiding, it wasn't her problem. She had overdue bills and a manager who'd threatened to cut her hours, and she didn't have time to sit around wondering why a man who didn't even give her his last name had disappeared. She didn't see the black car idling at the edge of the lot until she stepped outside. The back window rolled down. "Need a ride, Rowan?" She stared at him through the rain, the low hum of the engine barely audible over the storm. "You've got a car now." "I've always had one." She didn't move. "Where have you been?" He opened the door and stepped out, an umbrella in hand. His suit was darker than she'd ever seen him wear before, tailored, sharp, the kind that didn't belong in a place like this. He held the umbrella over her without asking, his expression unreadable. "Come with me," he said softly. "Why?" "Because I have something to show you." Her instinct screamed to say no, but she didn't. She slid into the car, her soaked jacket dripping against the leather seat. The interior smelled faintly of cedar and something clean, expensive. Rowan got in beside her, handed her a dry towel without a word. They drove in silence for nearly 20 minutes, weaving through neighborhoods she'd only seen on real estate websites. She couldn't afford to browse longer than a minute. When they pulled up to the gated driveway, she turned sharply toward him. "This is your house." "No." The gates opened automatically, revealing a sleek modern building with glass walls and soft lights that lit up the surrounding trees like a dream. The car pulled into a circular drive and stopped in front of double doors. Rowan stepped out first. She followed, water still clinging to her cuffs. Inside, the space opened like something out of a movie. High ceilings, an open staircase, oversized art she didn't recognize. A grand piano stood near a wall of windows, untouched. "This is one of my properties," he said, walking ahead of her. "I don't live here full-time." Kiera stood frozen in the entryway, soaked and speechless. "You own this?" she asked finally. "I own a lot of things." She turned slowly. "So you've been lying." "I never lied. You let me think you were just some guy passing through." "I never said that either." She stared at him, her voice rising. "You let me talk about bills and second jobs, and you sat there ordering cocoa like we were on the same planet." Rowan took a step closer. "I didn't come to that diner to play a part, Kiera. I came because I was tired of everyone wanting something from me. You didn't. You just talked to me like I was human." She folded her arms tightly. So what is this? Some twisted social experiment, he flinched. No, it's me trying to be honest now. She looked around the room, her voice shaking. Why bring me here? He walked over to the side table, picked up a folder and held it out to her. She didn't take it. What is that? He laid it on the nearby table instead and opened it. Drawings, designs, floor plans, a business proposal, page and pastry. Her jaw dropped. This is your dream, he said. I had my team run numbers, find potential spaces. There's a place on Maple and 5th near the park. Big windows, good foot traffic. We can make it real. Her voice cracked. I want to help you start it. She backed away. You think you can just throw money at me and fix everything? It's not about fixing anything. It's about believing in something. Her eyes burned. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you'd never ask for help, even when you need it. And I know you light up when you talk about that bakery bookstore like it's the only place in the world you'd ever feel at home. Silence stretched between them. I don't want your money, she whispered. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a partnership. She stepped forward, tears pooling in her eyes. Why me? His voice was lower now. Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the first night you laughed at my pie question. Because I've built empires and made enemies and sat at more empty dinner tables than I can count, and none of it ever mattered until you. She looked away, her throat tight. I should go. Then I'll take you. She didn't answer. He stepped back, giving her space. But as she turned toward the door, her gaze fell again on the open folder. Her name was there, printed in bold across the top of the proposal, not Miss Nolan, not a placeholder. Kiera Jean Nolan, co-founder. She blinked hard and walked out into the night. Kiera didn't return to the diner for 3 days. She didn't call him. She didn't answer the sleek black car that idled outside her building the next evening. She didn't open the envelope he'd sent to her apartment, the one she found tucked beneath her door, unmarked except for her name in clean handwriting. It sat on her kitchen table, unopened. Just like the folder still spread across her memory. Instead, she worked. She scrubbed floors, organized file cabinets, and cleaned conference rooms of corporate offices that smelled like sterile ambition. She kept her head down, her mind buzzing with arguments she'd never say out loud. Ones that ranged from furious to confused to something closer to terrified. On the 4th night, her landlord taped a notice to her door, a rent increase. Effective next month. Her chest tightened so suddenly she had to grip the counter to steady herself. She stared at the paper, the numbers blurring. She would have to pick up another shift, maybe more. She couldn't afford to fall behind. Not again. That night she went to the diner. It was nearly empty. Just a couple of truckers near the window and me behind the counter, humming to herself while wiping down coffee cups. Kiera took the booth in the far corner, the one she hadn't sat in since Rowan disappeared behind that glass house and the truth he'd kept gleaming behind it. Me approached with a tired smile. You want your usual? No, Kiera said. Just tea. Me raised a brow but didn't ask. The door opened behind her. Kiera didn't turn. She knew it was him. His footsteps were slower than usual. When he reached the table, he didn't sit. He stood beside the booth, waiting. Can I? She nodded once. Rowan lowered himself across from her, his jacket damp from the fog outside. His shirt collar was open, no tie. He looked like he hadn't shaved in a day. His eyes were tired but steady. I didn't come here expecting anything, he said. I just hoped. She didn't answer. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. I know I handled it wrong. I should have told you who I was the moment I knew I wanted to matter to you. Then why didn't you? Her voice was quiet but sharp. Why wait? Because I didn't want to watch it change the way you looked at me. She looked down at her hands. I spent years surrounded by people who only see the dollar signs, who smile at me because of what I can fund, not who I am. The first night I met you, you looked at me like I was just a guy trying to steal a slice of pie, and I've never felt more real. She stayed silent. I bought the building, he said suddenly. Kiera's head snapped up. What? The one on Maple and 5th. It's yours. I signed it into your name this morning. Her mouth opened, slack in disbelief. You can't just, I didn't do it to control you. I did it because I believe in Paige and Pastry. And I believe in you. You made a business decision based on a woman who won't return your calls. I made a decision based on a woman who knows her worth even when the world doesn't, who shows up drenched in rain and still laughs at dry jokes. Who's built more with less than most people ever will. She looked away, jaw tight. Why are you really here? She asked. Because this doesn't feel like guilt, it feels like something else. Rowan exhaled. Because I miss you, her heart thudded. I miss the way you drink hot chocolate like it's sacred. I miss how you correct me when I make up words. I miss how you look at the world like it hasn't beaten you yet, and I miss being the man you talk to when you're tired, not the one you're trying to forget. She stared at him, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to trust this. Then don't, not yet. Let me earn it. How? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a key. He slid it across the table. That's to the storefront. It's empty now, but it won't be for long. There's no pressure, no contracts, just a place. Yours, whether I'm in the picture or not. She stared at the key, unmoving. Me dropped off the tea and left without a word. When Kiera finally looked up again, her voice was steadier. You're not going to walk away if I say I need time? I'll wait as long as it takes. I don't want to be a project. You're not. You're a partner. What if I open this place and fail? Then we fail together. She looked at him, really looked. Past the tailored suits and polished smiles, past the private cars and mysterious silence. Past the man who'd once sat across from her in a cracked vinyl booth and asked about a slice of pie like it was the most important question in the world. I want 3 things, she said. Rowan straightened. Name them. First, you tell me when you're scared, not after. Not once it's convenient. Done. Second, if we do this the store us I get decisions. Equal ones. Agreed. Third, she said, lifting the key and curling her fingers around it, you come with me to see it. Now. He stood without hesitation. Let's go. The drive to Maple and Fifth was quiet but full of something stronger than words. When they pulled up beside the storefront, the windows were dark but clean. A faint glow from the street lamps lit the hand-painted sign in the window, coming soon, Paige and Pastry. Kiera stepped out of the car, the key heavy in her palm. Her breath caught. Rowan stood beside her, waiting. She unlocked the door and pushed it open. The space was large but warm. High ceilings, brick walls, wood floors that creaked softly underfoot. At the far end, a counter waited for display cases. To the right, a wall of built-in shelves stretched across the room. She turned in a slow circle, her voice barely a whisper. It's perfect. Rowan watched her, hands in his pockets. I don't know if I'm ready to love you yet, she said softly. He stepped closer. Then I'll love you enough until you are. She turned to him, the echo of those words sinking deep. And for the first time in days, she smiled, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, but inside, the world was quiet. Full of promise. Full of pie and pages and a new beginning, not built on money, built on honesty, on laughter, on a midnight booth and a man who never once asked her to change. She reached for his hand, and he took it like he'd been waiting his whole life. Kiera stood in the middle of the empty storefront 2 weeks later, her hands dusted with powdered sugar, her hair loosely tied back and full of flour. The scent of vanilla and warm cinnamon lingered in the air from the test batch of pastries she and the newly hired baker had just finished. Natural light poured in through the tall windows, illuminating the fresh paint and the newly installed shelves stacked with books of all genres, all handpicked by her. The espresso machine hissed softly in the background, operated by Callahan, their barista in training. Kiera watched her from across the room, smiling as she fumbled with the foam pattern and laughed at her own mistake. On the wall behind the counter, the hand-painted sign gleamed in soft gold, Paige and Pastry. Grand opening Saturday, everything was ready, everything except her. She turned toward the back hallway, where the office door stood slightly ajar. Rowan had been in there most of the afternoon, finalizing contracts and supplier agreements. He'd offered to step back to let her take the lead, and he had entirely. He never hovered, never micromanaged. He simply supported, quietly. Without needing to be praised for it, she tapped gently on the door. He looked up from his laptop, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, his tie abandoned somewhere hours ago. "Hey," he said, his eyes lighting up the way they always did when he looked at her. "How's the lemon glaze test, Divine?" she said, leaning against the doorframe. "We might cause a sugar riot." He closed the laptop. "Good problem to have," she hesitated. "We're really doing this." "We are. I keep waiting for something to go wrong." He stood and crossed the room to her, brushing a streak of flour from her cheek with the back of his knuckle. "It already did. I fell for someone who didn't want to need anyone." She gave him a look. And I kept showing up anyway." She glanced down at the floor, then back at him. "I was terrified, Rowan, of being swept up into your world and losing myself in it, of having something good and not being strong enough to keep it." He took her hand in his voice steady. "You didn't lose yourself, you built something, you made this happen. This is your world now." She stepped closer, lacing her fingers with his. "I'm not scared anymore." "Good," he whispered, "because I have a question." She blinked. Right now, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught in her throat. "I didn't plan to do this here. I was going to wait until the opening, or maybe a rooftop, or Paris, something dramatic." She stared at him wide-eyed. "But then I realized none of those places matter, not the private jets or the champagne or whether the sky is full of stars. What matters is this, you, me, a bakery that smells like heaven, a bookstore that feels like home." He dropped down on one knee. She gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "Kiera Nolan," he said, opening the box to reveal a diamond nestled in a delicate gold band, elegant and understated, exactly her style. "You changed everything. You made me remember who I am outside the boardrooms and the headlines. You made me want more than legacy and numbers. You made me want a life." He looked up at her, eyes vulnerable and full of hope. "Will you marry me, build this life with me, page by page, pastry by pastry?" She didn't cry. She laughed a breathless, disbelieving, radiant laugh and dropped to her knees in front of him, cupping his face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. You beautiful, infuriating man, yes." He kissed her then, right there on the office floor, with the scent of pastries in the air and the sound of Caroline squealing from the front when she saw them through the window. By the following Saturday, the grand opening was more than just a business milestone, it was a celebration of something deeper. The line outside the shop stretched around the corner. Locals arrived in waves, drawn by the buzz on social media and the smell of fresh scones. Children pressed their noses to the glass cases. Couples curled up with novels in the reading nook, and the mayor himself cut the ribbon. Kiera wore a dress the color of soft buttercream, and a necklace Rowan had given her that morning, a tiny gold book pendant with their initials engraved inside. Rowan stayed mostly behind the scenes, occasionally stepping out to shake hands or refill coffee cups, but his eyes never strayed far from her. He watched her laugh with customers, recommend books, wipe a smudge of icing off a child's cheek. He watched her shine. That night, once the doors were locked and the lights turned low, he pulled her onto the pastry counter and danced with her to the sound of no music at all. "You ready for forever?" he asked, his hand pressed to her lower back. "As long as it includes an endless supply of espresso and you remembering where I put the keys," she teased. "I can do that." They moved into a brownstone near the shop a week later, one with creaky floors and a tiny garden where Kiera planted lavender. Rowan still traveled, but not nearly as often. When he did, she went with him. Sometimes they hosted book clubs in the shop after hours. Sometimes they danced in the kitchen while the croissants baked. And one crisp autumn afternoon, with copper leaves dancing in the breeze and cinnamon in the air, they stood beneath an arch of books and flowers and said their vows, surrounded by friends, staff, and a community they had unknowingly built together. Rowan promised to never make her feel small in a world that often did. Kiera promised to remind him that love didn't need luxury to be real. When he kissed her, the applause was thunderous, but neither of them heard it. Because in that moment, The only thing that existed was the feeling of finding home in each other, and they never lost it again.